Hey guys, welcome back to Mo's Game Table. Today we're going to take a look inside Flashpoint, South China Sea. This is a game designed by Harold Buchanan and published by GMT Games. This is the first in the Flashpoint series, listed as Volume 1, with other games apparently planned in the series. Remember, a couple of years ago, GMT came out with what they called their Lunchtime series, and this is following suit. These games are expected to run roughly 30 to 45 minutes, essentially a lunchtime game. So it's great to see these games that are fit within an hour or less, especially if they hit that 30, 45 minute mark. You could potentially get 2 games done in 1 lunch hour. And with current geopolitical events as they are, this is a worthy subject to tackle. So let's take a look at the back of the box and see what this game's all about. Flashpoint South China Sea is a 2-player strategy game that simulates the complex geopolitical competition currently taking place between the United States and China in a disputed region of the South China Sea. The game is driven by a card deck that captures developments ripped straight from today's headlines, bolstered by cards with a context-setting reading of recent history and a set of speculative cards capturing a diverse range of potential future events. The Chinese player works to influence other countries in the region, establish territorial claims and regional hegemony, and improve its world standing. The U.S. player works to maintain influence with allied countries in the region, secure freedom of navigation, and keep China in check. Success for both players hinges on the support and allegiance of non-player countries in the region. The game stops short of dealing with a potential full-scale military conflict. Rather, it requires the nuanced exercise of political, economic, and military resources in a form of prima facie diplomacy on the waters, in the air, and ultimately in the minds of the people to achieve victory. As the United States player, can you defend the claims of your allies and stare down the Chinese player in a high-stakes game of chicken? As the Chinese player, can you use your developing economy and military power in the region to solidify your claims and develop strategic dominance of the region? You can see an example of the cards, the cubes, and the map. At the top, we have game contents: 32 wooden cubes, 3 black wooden discs, 1 mounted game board, 2 rule books, 1 playbook, 3 player aids, and 63 playing cards. It is for ages 14 and up, 1 to 2 players, including a full solitaire system. Playing time is 30 to 60 minutes. It is low complexity, and the solitaire suitability is obviously high, being that it has a full solitaire system. So let's take a look inside and see what we get. All right, we got our rule book, playbook, the solo rule book, player aid cards, the mounted map, cubes, and our cards. So let's set up the map and take a closer look at the game. And we'll take a look at the mounted map that comes with the game. It's a beautifully done map. It has all the information you need, and it's not too crowded, and it's a nice size map, which is really critical, being that these Flashpoint series, these lunchtime games, are meant to be played in smaller spaces in shorter periods of time. So this is going to fit real well on a lunch table at work, which is great. If you can get a good opponent there at lunch, that's even better. You have a box for the People's Republic of China and 1 for the United States. You'll have your available reserve and your political warfare in both. On the left-hand side, we have 3 campaign slots. We have the tension track, which goes from low through medium to high into critical. Then you have 5 nation spots: Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, Brunei, and the Philippines. This is where you're going to be placing your influence economically and diplomatically on those locations. Then you have the island areas out in the South China Sea, and that's where the U.S. is going to be carrying out their freedom of navigation operations, and the Chinese will be carrying out their Chinese reclamation operations. At the bottom, we have the victory point track, which starts at 0 and goes all the way through 15 for both, which is an instant win for either side. But overall, great size map. Love the look of it. Has everything you need. Next, we'll take a look at the player aids that come with the game. On the first one here, we have the sequence of actions, and this is going to list down all the sequence of actions for each campaign. Remember, when we looked at the map, there were 3 campaigns listed on the left side. And on the reverse side, we have the operations cost table, which gives us a listing of the operations you can carry out, any prerequisites, as well as what the cost will be for the tension level that you're currently at in the game. And the second player aid card is for the solo opponents, both US and Chinese. On the front, we have the US opponent. giving you the sequence of play and all the steps there, as well as the reminders on the right-hand side. On the back, we have the China opponent, which is going to have the same listing for sequence of play, as well as the reminders that you'll need when playing the Solitaire bot. Next, we'll take a look at the cards that come with the game. First up are the scoring cards. At the top, we have scoring cards for each of the countries that are in the game: Malaysia, Vietnam, Brunei, Indonesia, and the Philippines, with the highest scoring cards being Vietnam and the Philippines. At the bottom, we have scorecards for economics, and then Chinese reclamation and phone op. Phone op is actually going to be 4 points, and the economics card is worth 1 point. Next, we'll take a look at the event cards that come with the game. The color banding on the left-hand side is either going to be black for eligible to be used by both players, red for China, or blue for the United States. At the bottom, just like we see with most CDGs, we have our event. At the top left, you have the ops value. The bottom left, you have the scoring impact, which will allow you to play this to score for that card. In this instance, it would be the Philippines. Then that scoring card is turned over. And then underneath the ops value, you have the mode. There are 3 different modes. You have military, trade, and lastly, territorial. This can be matched up to the discard pile. If the card there is friendly and you match the mode, you can then execute either the discarded card's event or the scoring impact, which is pretty cool because you've got a card out of play. You think it's out of play? Nope. If you can match the mode, it's back in play. And lastly, we have the deck of solo cards. There are 8 of these in the game. I've got 5 of them out here. You've got 3 different sections on the solo cards. At the top, it tells you whether or not they will resolve political warfare. Below that tells you the order in which they will place their Chinese reclamation or phone ops. And lastly, the order in which they will place their influence on the different countries. Next, we'll take a look at the rules. This is for the 2-player game. Remember, there is a solo rulebook as well. This is 11 pages, full color. On the front, we have the table of contents listing out all the sections and their associated page numbers. Inside of the front cover, we have the introduction, listing of the components, the important terms and concepts that'll be used throughout the game. So that way you have a quick little definition guide to look up anything you're not sure of. Like we were talking about PW for political warfare, CR for Chinese reclamation, things like that. They'll become second nature as you play the game. But when you're first playing it, you can look it up there in the definitions and see what it is. On the next page, we have the setup, which lists out all the steps for setting up your board. And there's also an image over here for you to follow along with the numbers. Then we get into the gameplay, sequence of actions for each campaign, playing your event cards. We've already looked at the event cards. This explains the anatomy of the card, placing your influence, the tension track. There's some illustrated examples sprinkled throughout. Get to your operations, placing one influence cube in economic or diplomatic. You've got an example here. Freedom of navigation operations, Chinese reclamation, political warfare, and then resolve political warfare. That's all explained to you with good illustrated examples, making it really easy to understand the concepts in the game. Then we get to the scoring cards, the score countries, and then scoring your Chinese reclamation and freedom of navigation operations. Then we have scoring and victory, the victory point track. And then there's some interesting stuff here. We've got a playlist from Spotify. Just scan that QR code and it'll give you a different playlist. And then we have the Discord server there. On the back, we have the operations cost, the same as we saw on the player aid card. Next, we'll take a look at the Solitaire Rules of Play. This is a 19-page full-color rulebook. On the front cover, we have the table of contents listing out all the sections and their associated page numbers. Then we get to the introduction, the components listed for you. Again, the important terms and concepts, which if you play the 2-player, you're going to be familiar with already. Maybe some new ones in there for the Solitaire. Then we get to setup, again with the illustrated example of the setup. Makes it easy to get right into the game. And we start with the gameplay here on page 6. Sequence of actions for each campaign, what to do on your turn, and again with the influence, the tension track, same illustrated examples, or at least similar illustrated examples. I'm not sure what they've changed in the Solitaire game, but gives you all the steps with illustrated examples on how to do all of your actions. And then we have the solo opponent's turn. That's where things are going to be different. Obviously, if you've played the 2-player, you're going to know how to play the base mechanics of the game, and now you're going to get into running the solo bot. There's a solo cards, which you've taken a look at. I explained to you how the solo opponent scores, the mode match, the tension adjustment, political warfare, illustrated examples sprinkled throughout, which is great. I love illustrated examples. It really helps you understand the concepts of the game when you see it in action. Solo opponent operations, placing your influence, then running out of influence cubes, and then scoring in victory, the victory point track, instant victory, and endgame victory to close out the Solitaire rulebook. And lastly, we'll take a look at the playbook. This is a 12-page full-color book. On the front cover, we have the table of contents listing out all the sections and their associated page numbers. Inside of the front cover, we have a dedication from Harold Buchanan, his designer's notes, and then the developer and solo design notes from Jason Carr. Then we get to behind the cards. This is kind of like a gazetteer that's going to give you an explanation of all the events behind the cards, give you a little bit of a historical background on each of them. Then we have some strategy tips, South China Sea dispute timeline from 1947 through to 2021. Then we have the state of crisis, game credits. Then on the back, we have the event card distribution for the 48 cards in the game. And that is a look at everything you get inside of Flashpoint, South China Sea. This is a game designed by Harold Buchanan and published by GMT Games. Well, I remember when this game was in development a few years ago talking to Harold about it, and it's great to see it finally grown up into a full game, because it's kind of like watching a child grow when you see someone has a game in development and it keeps going through different iterations year after year, and it finally reaches maturity and it is on the table. So pretty cool to have this one on table. Thanks to GMT and to Harold for sending this out to me. I appreciate that. And I'm curious to see how this is going to play. You have the Flashpoint series, you have the Lunchtime series, the games like Fort Sumter, and now Flashpoint South China Sea, meant for those shorter time spans. So if you're at lunch, you could play solitaire, or you could play two-player if you're lucky and you have a gamer that you work with. Small footprint, going to get it on the table real easy while you're eating your lunch. Obviously, make sure that you don't get any sauce or any food on the board or on the components. You don't want to do that. Always play with good playing etiquette. But it'll be interesting to see how this is received, because these shorter games, one thing about them is because they're so short and they're quick, they're very abstract. So I'm hoping that this one does capture the essence of the struggle in the South China Sea. So that way more people can learn about the situation in the South China Sea. But looking forward to getting this one on the table. You can play it face-to-face with two-player, or can play it solitaire, which is really cool. Don't have to wait for an opponent. You can play it solo. Well, I hope that helps you guys out if you'd be curious about this one. If you have any comments or questions, post them down below. Thanks for tuning in, guys. See you next time.